How much house can you afford in 2024 and how much cash do you need to buy a house? Today we're going to walk through a few different examples at different salary ranges. It should give you a very good feel for how much you could potentially afford in 2024. Let's get started. Hey there, welcome back to my channel. I'm Erica Monroe. I'm a realtor in the Bay Area and I specialize in Solano County. Figuring out exactly how much house you'd qualify for is very complex. And just to preface this video, you really do need to speak to a lender before you truly understand how much house you can afford. There's just so many factors that they consider. But my goal here is to help you understand what it is they look for and how they make these calculations. When a lender goes to qualify a buyer, they start by looking at their debt to income ratio. We've discussed this concept before. Debt is your total monthly commitments compared to how much money you make each month. They're going to look at debt as your future mortgage payment, if you have any car payments that you have to make, student loan payments. If you've racked up a little bit of credit card debt, then they'll have to consider the minimum payment you have to make each month. They'll compare that against your gross monthly income, which means your pre-tax income. So they'll take your annual salary or annual earnings, divide that by 12, and that'll be your gross monthly income. It's not what you see on your paycheck. There will be a discrepancy because your paycheck is post-tax and post-401k contribution. Most lenders will acknowledge a 45% debt to income ratio as basically the maximum that you should qualify for. That means that your projected mortgage payment, if you have car payments, student loans, all of that has to be within 45% of your gross earnings. Let's take an example. If a household income is $120,000, let's say each spouse earns $60,000 a year. So they'll look at $120,000, divide that by 12, that'll be $10,000, and that is your gross monthly income. If you cannot exceed 45% of this, then we do 10,000 times 0.45, and that equals 4,500. That is absolutely the maximum we want to hit for all of our monthly expenses. Now, lenders don't take into consideration things like utilities, phone bills, car insurance. However, if you do have a solar lease or a solar loan, they will have to factor that into your debt to income ratio. With this example, we have 4,500 as our maximum debt. Now, let's say that we do have car payments and student loans. Let's say we have a $300 car payment each month. We have $300 in student loans. And let's say we have $100 worth of minimum credit card debt that we have to pay each month. That is altogether an additional $700. Well, we know we can't exceed $4,500 with all of our debt. So we need to subtract that $700 from the maximum $4,500, and that leaves us with $3,800. And that would be the maximum mortgage that you may qualify for. One crucial component, of course, in helping us determine the max purchase price is how much you have for a down payment. Now, according to the National Association of Realtors, the median down payment placed by buyers in 2023 was 15%. It was roughly 8% for first-time buyers and 19% for experienced buyers. Well, I'm here to tell you, most of my clients don't have 15% to put down. California is expensive and our home values are significantly higher than the national average. So for today's purposes, I'm going to focus on a 5% down payment as well as a 10% down payment scenario. So we're going to plug this into a mortgage calculator to help us determine exactly what that purchase price might be. I happen to like Zillow's mortgage calculator because I think it's very user-friendly and it helps to break down each component of your mortgage payment. It'll also give you a projection for PMI, which is mortgage insurance. Any buyer who places less than a 20% down payment is going to be charged mortgage insurance. You want to find a calculator that'll compute this for you to give you an idea of what you would be charged. It can be $100 to several $100s. So it's really important to factor this in because you better believe your lender will. And we want to project for the most accurate purchase price. I'm going to start us off at a $500,000 purchase price. I'm going to say that we have a 5% down payment, so that's $25,000. I'll use today's rates, which is roughly 6.6% over a 30-year term. Well, we can see that we have already exceeded the maximum payment we can afford. So we need to bring that price point down a little bit. So I'm going to come down to $480,000. Again, we'll project for 5%. Just because we have the cash doesn't mean we have to use it all. So that'll be $24,000 as a down payment. And it looks like we're hovering just in the right place. Now keep in mind, just because I'm showing you these projected maximums, it does not mean I encourage you to spend at the very top of your budget. You want to account for other expenses that the lender doesn't take into consideration, like utilities, car insurance, childcare. You also want to be protective of your quality of life, so it's not incredibly stressful each month trying to come up with this mortgage payment. Let's take the same borrower, $120,000 yearly income. Let's go ahead and say that they have a 10% down payment. So trying $500,000 with a 10% down payment would be $50,000. Looks like we've got a little wiggle room to go, so let's go up to $520,000. We'll adjust again that down payment to 10%. It looks like we've exceeded the amount by just a smidge. So we can start taking down that purchase price by $1,000 increments. Looks like we will end up at $515,000 as a maximum purchase price. Before we move on to our next example, keep in mind that a lender will have to factor in monthly HOA fees as well as higher taxes into your overall debt to income ratio. So if you are shopping at the top end of your budget, make sure your agent checks this for you as well as your lender to make sure that you would still qualify for the projected purchase price, because the higher the debt, remember, means that the purchase price may have to decrease to keep that monthly payment where it needs to be. So let's move on to the next salary level. Let's say that the household earns $180,000. Maybe these folks are a little more established in their career or they have high-paying jobs. So each partner brings in about $90,000 for a combined household income of $180,000. We divide that by 12 to get the gross monthly income, and that would be about $15,000. We want to calculate that debt to income ratio at a maximum of 45%. So 15,000 times 0.45 takes us to 6,750. That would be our maximum monthly debt. Well, let's say that this buyer's monthly commitments are a little bit higher. Maybe they have more extensive student loans or their car payment is higher. Let's project for about $1,200 in other debt expenses. So we want to take 6,750 and subtract 1,200. And that brings our maximum mortgage payment to $5,550. Let's go back to the calculator here. I'm going to start us off at about $700,000. We'll project for a 5% down payment, which would be $35,000. And it looks like we're right up against that threshold here. I can try a little bit higher of a price point and see if we've got a little wiggle room. Let's try $710,000. And looks like this is probably the maximum this borrower would be able to afford. Same borrower, similar situation, except they have a 10% down payment. Let's try a purchase price of $725,000, again with a 10% down payment. Looks like we've got some wiggle room here. We'll just keep playing around with the numbers until we reach our target, which looks like about $760,000, assuming this borrower has that 10% down payment. So now you should have a pretty good understanding of how a lender will project for your maximum purchase price and calculate your debt to income ratio. Now keep in mind there are a lot of factors such as your credit score. I assumed this buyer had a pretty strong credit score, somewhere around 700, but that can impact your interest rate, which will overall impact your maximum purchase price. Now let's move on to how much cash you need to close on a house. Ultimately, this will depend on your target purchase price, but for ease, I'm going to use the minimum down payment required. 3.5% is the minimum you need for an FHA loan. 3% is the absolute bare minimum you would need for a conventional loan if you qualified for it. So 3.5% will be our down payment amount. We also need to account for closing costs, and these are not discussed enough. Closing costs are anywhere from 2 to 4%, possibly higher, of the purchase price. That accounts for lender fees, title and escrow fees, prepaid taxes, 1 year of homeowner's insurance. You're also going to have your first month mortgage prepaid into this amount. So it is a substantial figure. We're going to project for 3% of the purchase price for our closing costs. That means, for the sake of this example, we need about 6.5% of the purchase price at each of these levels, and that would be the minimum amount of cash you would need to close on a house. Thanks so much for watching. Please reach out to me if you'd like to work together, or if you're in another area and you need some assistance in finding a phenomenal realtor, I would be happy to help.